So if Paul was feeding those folk with milk, I think Jesus has hit us up with the hard food. I hadn't said it at the first service, but it's like, hi, I'm Dave. I married a divorced woman. I guess I'm an adulterer. But let's kind of see maybe where Jesus is going with all of this stuff. Have you ever offended somebody by word or deed? Have you ever been offended by something that somebody has said about you? Every day we run the risk of offending someone or of being offended. And it's not a matter of if it will happen, but just a question of when. Today it seems that folk are just looking for an excuse to be offended. It's reaching the point where we don't know what to say to each other for fear of being blasted by the other's response. Now I know it's a safe bet that each of us is guilty of offending another from time to time, and we may not have meant to do so. We might not even be aware that we did so. Yet we have somehow, and then come hard feelings and cold looks and recognition that there's a gulf in the relationship. This morning we hear Jesus teaching his followers about how to deal with those times when we have somehow hurt someone and need to set it right, to amend the damage. This also includes the need to forgive those who have hurt us. However, his teaching entails embracing a righteousness that exceeds the requirements of the Ten Commandments and the traditional expectations and understandings connected with them. Jesus is leading us into deeper understanding of the importance of reconciliation and forgiveness. He begins by saying, "You have heard it said," with respect to the commandment on murder. Now, naturally, those listening would think of the act of taking another's life physically. Most probably thought, oh, he's not talking about me. And then Jesus expands on what they've heard. But I say to you, when Jesus drops "but I" into a sentence, get ready. Did you realize that there's more than one way to murder someone? Yes, there is the Law and Order CSI sense of it, taking another's life. However, damaging words or deeds or rumors or innuendo or gossip have the power to murder another's spirit, another's reputation. This is the expansion of murder Jesus provides, the inclusion of the times when by thought, word, or deed, we intentionally or unintentionally harm another person. Sadly, many Christians do this and think they're doing God's work. Anyone here ever been told they're going to hell because they were sprinkled instead of fully immersed at baptism? Anyone ever been told that they're not Christian because of the way they vote? Or the way they dress for church? Anyone ever been shamed by church people because of how their child behaved during a worship service? Anyone ever been hurt by gossip? Who would have thought that there were so many murderers within the church's walls? Jesus reveals that we murder with careless words and with unchecked, unresolved anger, because such anger breeds hatred. That's where being unforgiving leads hatred. Hatred not dealt with leads to judgment. have another wrinkle in our understanding of murder. If you come to the altar to leave an offering and remember that you have offended another, you go make it right, and then come and give your offering. There comes a time in worship, not long from now, when we exchange the peace. I know that we all love it because it's saying hi to the people that we love and shaking hands, but its true purpose is right there. To be reconciled with the one with whom you're at odds. And that can be the hardest thing to do on a Sunday morning. There's that person you are so angry with, but Jesus says, go and be reconciled before your gift comes up. Reconciliation is your top priority. In this way, God uses you to be a minister of grace. God's people, we, are the ones to be quick to attempt to set things right. In doing so, we not only reconcile relationships, but reveal to others that doing so can lead to healing and restoration, not only of yourself, but of the other. Suzanne Guthrie, writing in Christian Century, shares this story. A friend of mine who served in the military during World War II, and is now a nun, was once at a conference with two men, a German and an American. As they wiped dishes one evening after dinner, they exchanged stories about the war. The American told of the horror he felt as a young pilot during a particularly savage bombing of a city in Germany. He had orders to bomb the hospital, which he would know by the huge red cross painted on its roof. The second man, after regaining his composure, revealed that his wife had been giving birth to their baby in that very hospital when it was bombed. Suzanne concludes the story. My friend tiptoed out of the room as the two men fell into each other's arms, weeping. The ways we transgress against each other are limitless, but generally fall into just two categories. The first category, we truly did no harm, but somehow a person is offended, believing we were unjust in our treatment of him or her. So let's say you and your friend Veronica have a disagreement that really upsets you. And you talk to another friend, Bob, to figure out how to resolve it. And you're overheard in your conversation by Sally. And Sally takes what she hears, the bits of conversation, weaves them into her own little version of your story, tells it to somebody else, who tells it to somebody else, who tells it to somebody else, who tells it to Veronica. Y'all remember the game telephone as a kid? You start off with one message, and by the time it gets around the whole room, is it the same message? No. It's gotten grossly distorted, just as what you said has now traveled into Veronica's ears. How can she not look at the situation and think, well, some friend? Inaccurate information has led her to an inaccurate conclusion, but she's hurt. Our intent may have been not to harm, but our words and actions ultimately brought pain to another, even if it wasn't our intent, even if it stemmed from the gossip's meddling. In this category, while we might now be upset, obviously, with the gossipers, it's going to take our reaching out to Veronica to clear the air, to reconcile the relationship, to heal the pain. Now, I said there were two categories. The other category, oh yeah, there's no mistaking it. We sinned against Veronica. For whatever reason, we did it. We stand guilty. It was intentional. And the weight of that and the duty to seek forgiveness and mend what we've shattered rests with us. Does any of this sound familiar? Who have you hurt or offended? Maybe you didn't realize it at the time. Maybe you didn't think about what your actions, words were going to do to those around you. Maybe at the time you just didn't care. These are the persons to whom Jesus sends us, so we might be reconciled with them. Leave your offering and go. But what if they aren't willing to be reconciled to you? What if they refuse to forgive you? What then? In his letter to the Romans, St. Paul notes, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live in peace with others. Amy Beale died a violent death in 1993. She was a 26-year-old Fulbright scholar who had gone to South Africa to help register black voters for their first free election. But even though she was seeking to help the people of South Africa, as she was driving one day, she was dragged out of her car, stabbed and beaten to death by a mob intent and committed to violence to overthrow the apartheid government. Soon afterwards, Amy's parents, Linda and Peter Beale, quit their jobs and moved from their Orange County, California home to South Africa. Not seeking revenge, but to start a foundation in Amy's name. Today, 2 of Amy's killers work for that foundation. They call Amy's mom Makulu, grandmother, because of the way she treats them. She says forgiving is looking at ourselves and saying, I don't want to go through life feeling hateful and revengeful, because that's not going to do me any good. We took Amy's lead. We did what we felt she would want. That is reconciliation. It not only forgives, it reaches out to restore. It pays back good for evil. It's following the heart and character of God. St. Paul again, all this is from God who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting humans' sins against them. That he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. Now, there are folks who, despite your sincerest attempts, your deepest entreaties, your deepest desires, may refuse your attempts to restore peace to the valley. Does that mean you shouldn't make amends? As best we can, we do that. We make amends where amends can be made. As Paul said, as much depends on you. Do everything we can to be reconciled with the other person. Even if we're not wrong, even if we didn't do anything, be reconciled with the other, because that is what Jesus would have us do. They won't talk, send a letter. They won't meet with you alone, bring a friend. Near the beginning of this chapter, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." He didn't say, "Blessed are the peacekeepers." Peacekeepers avoid confrontation at all costs, to maintain peace, even at the sake of the truth. A peacemaker, though, they wade into the confrontation. They go in love, bringing truth, so that reconciliation might occur and endure. Because God is this way with us. God is not willing that any should perish, neither will God compromise the truth for the relationship. God will seek reconciliation, but not at the expense of truth. Too often we live in regret. You know what it sounds like. I should have. I could have. I would have. If only. Jesus is teaching us to follow not just the law of God's word that we see in the commandments, but its life-giving spirit. To do what you can and leave the rest to God. Being obedient opens this avenue of grace in the lives of those who we ask for forgiveness. How do you approach those you've offended or have offended you? Humbly, in truth, with a willingness to listen as much as or even more than to speak, to find a way through to be at peace with each other. Going to do this doesn't guarantee they'll be opening to listening or to talking, or it might be that they rant all over you. Hearing what they say may not be easy. You may want to be defensive. Maybe they're way off base, or maybe they're right on point. But the purpose of going to those we have wronged is twofold. To be used by God to open up that avenue of grace, and the second is to be reconciled. If you're only there to prove that you were right, you've gone with the wrong of intentions. You're way off base. Those intentions might be coming from the evil one, goading you into being that good, self-righteous person. So go humbly to the one that's been wronged and say, please forgive me. I was wrong. It's a first step. Opening the way to reconciliation, and it's going to take time to heal. If you've ever really shattered a relationship, you know it doesn't reconcile overnight. It takes the time it takes. And if they aren't open to forgiving, leave it in God's hands. As much as it depends on you, live in peace with others. So to whom do you need to go? From whom do you need to seek forgiveness? With whom do you need to be reconciled? Because in doing so, freedom awaits. In doing so, you both model and extend God's grace to those in pain, those in need of healing. In doing so, you move through forgiveness and into the deeper water called reconciliation, which is the objective of forgiveness. God made an unfathomable sacrifice to forgive and reconcile you and me to God's own self, in spite of all that we do and all that we've done. In our daily lives, forgiveness often comes easily, quickly, far more so than reconciliation does. Indeed, you and me, we might not depart this earth reconciled with all of those with whom we share wounded relationships. Dietrich Bonhoeffer forgave his Nazi guards time and time again while he was in prison. He followed Jesus and sought reconciliation with them, even though they harmed him again and again. One thing precluded that reconciliation between them: his execution at Hitler's orders. Given the man that he was, given the follower of Jesus that he was, and that he strived to model even in prison, I've no doubt that Bonhoeffer would have sought to be reconciled with them all. Only death stopped him. What's stopping you?